Hello everyone, I'm Sam, I'm the bassist in Notora, and today, like Darren already has, and depending when this comes out, Dylan has, I'm going to be running through my rig today. I'm going to talk about my live rig and what I've used in the studio so far and plans for the future as well. First of all, let's look at this. This is my Fender PS Series P-Bass. I bought it brand new when I started playing with the guys, and this has been my absolute go-to pretty much the entire time I've been playing with them. It's got a maple neck and just a standard P-Bass pickups. I replaced the pickguard with a black one because I just think it looks better. I've gigged with this 90% of the time, I believe. It sounds great as soon as you plug it in. You don't need to fiddle around with EQ or anything. It sounds great straight in. This is the bass that I've actually used so far on all the Notora releases, that being Stay, Brother and Silver Screen. For Silver Screen, I used an amp called the Selmer Treble and Bass Mark III, which I'm not even sure if it's actually a bass amp. I've been trying to look into it. It's from 1967, but it sounded fantastic when we plugged into it. I'm pretty sure it broke after I used it, but what are you going to do? For Stay and Brother, I used an Ampeg SVT with this bass, which is possibly one of the greatest bass amps of all time. You can't go wrong with a P-Bass, honestly. Having said that, I do have another one, which we'll look at now. This is a Squier Classic Vibe 54 P-Bass. Now, unlike the other one, if you see here, it's got an inline pickup rather than the splits pickup of normal P-Basses. Now this pickup is actually a custom pickup made by Matt at House of Tone. It's a lot more aggressive than the standard pickup was. It's such an improvement. I'm able to get the aggression that I need for my tone, and it just feels great. It's absolutely fantastic. This is the bass that I will use for more drop tunings live. So for example, the blue P-Bass I showed you would be tuned to standard or drop D, whereas this one will be in D standard or drop C for the time being. So if we want to get heavier, this bass is a lot more suitable because the pickup's a lot hotter and I'm able to get the more aggressive tones a lot easier from it. Let's go to the third bass, which is one I've seldom used, but it's one that I want to incorporate a lot more. That is my Squier Vintage Modified Fretless bass. It's a jazz bass, it's got the regular jazz setup with 2 pickups, but of course it's got no frets, so it's a bit harder to use, which is why I've not been using it as much live. But I've been practicing, and in future I hope to incorporate this, especially in some of the more vibey stuff. Because of the sound that the fretless bass emits, it's a lot warmer. It could be very interesting, I think. So the design of this bass is actually based off of a relic that legendary fretless bassist Jaco Pastorius did to his bass. He removed the pickguard on the Sunburst model and it ended up being an iconic look. As much as I don't particularly enjoy Sunburst finishes, it works well on this. And that brings us to our final bass and the newest bass I own, the Dingwall NG2. Now this one is a lot different than the other basses I own. First of all, it's got 5 strings, tuned in standard and then down to B, which is a lot lower than any other bass I own goes to. Second difference, it's got humbucking pickups instead of single coils, which helps it gain a much more aggressive sound than anything I have currently. Third difference, you may have noticed or may not, the entire guitar is slanted. It is a fan fret model, which means that this lowest string here is a lot longer than the highest string. This is to make sure it's more stable in the drop tunings, and as hard as it looks to play, it really isn't. There isn't really any adjustment time. This bass I actually won in a competition, and it's been my dream bass for a long time, so to own one is absolutely unreal. It's got active passive switching, whereas all my other basses here are passive. What that means is that there is a battery inside that when you flip it to active, it activates a tone circuit within the bass, which changes the characteristics of how it sounds. I'll talk more about that when I come to my pedal board because it ties in quite nicely. It's probably the easiest bass I have to play, and once I start gigging again, you're probably going to see a lot more of this, and in the studio for that matter. And that just about does it for the basses. I do have a bass with Dylan. It is a Fender Marcus Miller jazz bass in Olympic White, which also has active and passive switching for the tonal differences, but it is single coil and it fulfills a much different need. Fantastic bass. It's the one we use on pretty much all our demos, and I've used it live a lot as well. It was the first good bass I ever owned. And here we have my entire, as of right now, pedal board. So starting at the top right, we've got a Korg pitch black mini tuner. Because me and Dalan do this weird thing where we like to play in tunes sometimes. Bit unconventional, but there we go. That was the worst joke I've ever made. Onto the next pedal is a Dark Glass Super Symmetry compressor pedal. This pedal is absolutely fantastic as it squashes down high volume stray notes and ends up giving everything a much more even volume. Now this is especially helpful for me as during a set I will play with a pick, I will play slap bass, and I will play with my fingers. And this ensures that when I switch between them, there isn't a massive discrepancy in the volume. A secondary feature of this is that it does colour the tone of my playing a little bit. Some people don't like this, but for me, I think it's absolutely perfect, which is why this compressor stays on for most of my live gigging. Next up, we have the Dark Glass Duality fuzz pedal. Now, in my mind, a fuzz pedal is an absolute staple of a bassist board, and this one is the best one I have ever played. It manages to balance high-end fuzz and low-end cleanliness in a way that I haven't seen with any other fuzz pedal, and it also has a very clean, smooth fuzz, which I enjoy much more than the crazy stuff that some of the other pedals, for example the Big Muff. It's the closest thing I've ever found to achieving Christopher Wolstenholme of Muse bass tone when he activates his fuzz in a singular pedal. This is absolutely fantastic, and you can tell that there's a bit of a theme going on with Dark Glass here. Moving on, we've got the Boss Bass Chorus pedal. Now this pedal is an absolute godsend for when I want my sound to take on a bit more of a vintage colour. It enables me to do that with the tone it adds. It also helps my sound become a bit fuller. A bass chorus, for those who don't know how a chorus works, in the days of tape recording, they would play the track twice and detune one of them and play them together, and that gives you the chorus effect. So, when you play with a chorus effect pedal, it gives you the impression of a slightly fuller sound. Moving on, we have the MXR Carbon Copy Analog Delay. Now, a delay pedal is relatively unconventional for bassists, although a few noteworthy examples include Les Claypool. But for a lot of the ambient playing that I do, and that's certainly my forte when it comes to writing, it definitely helps set the mood of what I'm trying to achieve. And that's why this is on my board. It is absolutely fantastic, especially with the modulated setting, which in a way gives it a sort of chorusy type effect without having to resort to the heaviness of the chorus pedal. Moving on, here we have the Electro Harmonix Freeze pedal, which is an infinite sustain pedal. It might seem a bit niche, but I use this, and in fact I use all three settings on this in pretty much every gig we have ever done as Squier or Notora, at least since I bought the pedal. Now you can have it on the fast setting, which will sustain as long as you hold the button. You can have the slow setting, which will sustain as long as you hold the button again, but will trail off slowly once you release it. And then you have the latch setting, which will sustain the note from the moment you press it until the moment you turn it off. Now this pedal allows me to add a massive amount of thickness to certain parts of the set. It allows me to imitate a bass synth, where if you imagine holding a key down indefinitely, I can achieve that with this pedal. It's absolutely fantastic, probably the best value pedal I've got. Now we move on to this, which is the Dark Glass Microtubes B7K preamp. If I had to sum up one piece of gear that most characterizes my tone, it would be this pedal. This pedal is essentially an amp in a pedal box. This completely dictates my entire tone. I use it in favor of any preamp on a complete combo amp or head as of right now. It has the perfect blend of grit and cleanliness that I search for in my sound, especially playing mostly through single coils. It also has a direct output, so that I don't even need to plug it into an amp. It can go straight into a PA system, straight into a computer, however I want to use it. This is the best pedal I own, and I can't foresee myself ever getting rid of it. It is so vital to the sound that I wish to achieve as a bassist. There we have the entire pedal board. I know it's a bit of a mess, but more pedals will be coming and I'll be forced to clean it up. For example, I want to add an octave pedal with an expression pedal so that I can control octaves on the fly. And I have a bass synth pedal that I wish to add for some more 80s style sounds. Okay, and now onto the amps that I use, which is honestly more of a footnote for me due to the Dark Glass preamp pedal that I showed you. Most amps would do the job for me because of that pedal, but I do have my own amps. The first of which is down here. It is a Trace Elliott combo from the 90s. It's a solid state amp. It really pairs well with the Dark Glass preamp pedal due to the fact that it has a powerful low end, which is the only thing that the Dark Glass pedal lacks. So I'm able to EQ it in a certain way that gives me the most full sound I can possibly want. It has a single 15-inch speaker, which really helps with the low end as well, and this has been my gigging amp for the entire time I have been with the guys. Soon enough, I plan to move over to this. This is an Ashdown cab with two 15-inch speakers, and it is 800 watts. The plan, hopefully once we start gigging, is to pair this with a Dark Glass Microtubes amp, which will be 500 watts, and due to the big drivers of these speakers and the EQing on the amp, I will be able to replicate what I do with the pedal and the amp in a much more powerful, authentic way. And I'm really looking forward to showing everyone that. But for the meantime, it is essentially just a heavy table. Now, the final part of my rig, which is not overly important, but it is a staple of my gigging, is these, which are Dragonheart picks. I order them in from America, from the company that makes them. They are 2.5mm in thickness, and these are the most comfortable picks I have played during my entire playing career. I can play shows for 2-3 hours with one of these, and at no point am I feeling any fatigue in my grip. It has 3 points. You see the standard point, a more rounded point, and a much more pointed end. Most of the time, I will use the standard end. It is well rounded, it gets the job done. If I need to play something with an ultra aggressive attack, then I will use the pointed end. The rounded end I don't really use as a bassist, but when I'm playing guitar, it is fantastic for tremolo picking. I have probably about 10 of these. I use them all the time and I can't recommend them enough. And that is my entire rig. I'm sure that if I did one of these in a year's time, it will be vastly different from what I have done today. In the meantime, I hope you enjoy this insight into my tone and the sound that I go for live and in the studio. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. Stay safe and I'll see you next time.